Welcome, everyone, to our podcast of Cultivating a New Generation. In our episode 34, we are going to speak with Luci Gabel in the title of Remodeling Your Genes to Thrive. And Luci is the author of Eat to Live and a leadership strategist and professor at San Jose University and George Washington University School of Medicine. And if she wants to speak more about herself, so Luci, let us give us your background, please.
Oh, thanks, David. By the way, thank you so much for having me. As I said, I'm so excited for this conversation with you because we have so much in common.
Yes.
Yeah. And thanks for introducing me. So I have two background areas, as you kind of mentioned. I grew up in the science fields, and then when I went to college, I dove into the study of pre-medicine, basically. And then I decided, after looking at medicine for a while, there's something more, there's something bigger than medicine. Medicine is like the last resort. And we have control over that deeper stuff, which is our health, and it's how we take care of ourselves. So that's when I went on to get my master's in exercise physiology and nutrition, specifically how it affects health. And so that's one side of me. The other side is leadership. So I've been a leader in a variety of areas. I've worked at the Department of Defense. I've worked for private companies. I've been an entrepreneur and a VC-funded startup founder. And in all of this, I also got my master's in leadership business as well. So now I'm here and it's prime time. The two sides are coming together: leadership, who we are, how we lead our lives and lead other people. Goes hand in hand with how we take care of ourselves and other people. And it's about knowing how to do that, of course, but it's also about actually doing it. So we've got two levels, right? We've got the level of learning. And I find that, obviously we don't all take courses in nutrition or physical ailments or physiology. So a lot of us don't have the basic foundational knowledge of taking good care. And we get that knowledge from random places, social media, the news. And so it can be just partial knowledge, incomplete knowledge, which can then be a little bit dangerous, right? We can be lopsided in how we take care of ourselves or what we know. And then we move that into that actual doing phase. So there's knowledge and then there's action. And that's also where a lot of people get stuck. They know things, but they don't want to do it. They don't know how. They don't know how to change their lives, So now I'm coming into, that is why I wrote the book, Eat to Lead, because it's the foundation of how food works in the body, the whole picture, not just a little bit, and also a little bit about how to understand research today. And then in the back of every chapter, there's work, things you can do. You can take a big bite out of it or a small bite, whatever you can handle, and just work on something small based on what you learned in the book. And that's how we make meaningful, lasting change, So I'm enjoying teaching, and I also work with leaders on how to change their environment for their organizations into a healthy environment, and also how to change their own lives so that they can be the kind of leader that they want. And when I talk about healthy environment, David, I know you're going to go into this yourself, but it's not just about, providing an exercise class once a week or providing good, benefits. That's just a little piece of what we should be doing. But it's also about a healthy environment with trust and less stress and the right kind of flexibility and, people feeling good at work. And that also has to do with our health in a big way. And so I just want to pass this on to you, David, because you and I have a lot in common and we agree on these things. And I think that's really where we're going to dive into
I
today.
agree.
So, can you share also, just remind the audience a little bit about what your background is and what you're
Of course,
doing?
of course. Thank you for asking, Lucy. And as you mentioned, our goals start from one side of the picture, and we are lured or we are attracted to certain kind of things. As myself, I also was attracted at the first place by science, by how the body works. So I major in biochemistry. My bachelor's degree is in biochemistry. Then I did a master's degree in molecular biomedicine. I was in the University of Pennsylvania working with research in vaccines, in dendritic cells, in the immune response. Then I came back to Mexico and I was working here in multiple pharmaceutical industries in the major 5 top pharma companies. I was in the research department of vaccines or pharma, as they call it. And we also were doing these clinical trials with different types of medications. And we observed that also there was a placebo effect, something that for me was very, very attractive because I was early on asking how can people get better with nothing, with just the thought of knowing that they are going to receive something that it's going to help them. So that made me realize that we have a much more bigger picture of the things, and it's not just taking something to create health, as you mentioned. It is not just taking the basic knowledge, it is going beyond, and it is knowing yourself, and it is knowing how you work. So then I was again attracted to the academy. So I returned to teaching. I taught courses in molecular biomedicine, in molecular biology, in genetics, in immunology, and I was also pursuing a PhD in epigenetics of obesity. So I started to dive deep in the area, in the research of epigenetics, and that's the answer of what we are looking for. The answer is the environment. The answer is everything that surrounds us, as you mentioned. And it is not just one piece of the puzzle. It is not just what you eat. It is not just what you do in exercise. It is about how you sleep, your emotions, and of course, your economical or professional situation. Because if you are not motivated by what you are doing, of course, you are going to be uh, biased into a depressed mode or into an anxiety mode that is going to start pulling all the other areas into the unbalance or the this is, no? As I like to separate the word, the this is just an unbalance of our bodies, no? And it is always giving us the messages, but we are too distracted to listen to our bodies, no? So I totally resonate with what you are doing. And this is where we merge, as you mentioned, the science side and the spiritual or the other environmental factors that are contributing to our health, no?
Yeah. So powerful. I loved, just back to the placebo effect that you talked about early on in your career that you saw was happening. You were thinking there's something so much bigger to this, and how can people be getting better from nothing? I remember reading that the placebo effect is actually a big percentage of what we find in the research studies. Do you know that offhand?
Often it is around 30 to 50 sometimes, 30 to 50%. So
Yeah.
it varies, of course, on the ailment or on the disease. But if you can see a 30, if you can see a 50, that means that 70% of the things are just controlled by the things that we are thinking, no?
Yeah.
So the things that we are doing, the 50% is a lot of people that is just getting better with nothing. So, and that can be improved, I think, more if we just trust more in what we have inside, no?
Yeah, our body's ability to repair itself and to be healthy. We're naturally supposed to be healthy. Yeah. I was reading about, by the way, epigenetics is such an exciting area that I'm always looking into that. And that's really I think, proof that we can make ourselves better or keep ourselves well with not just thinking, but acting, of course. And and that's proof on how the environment affects not just, what we look like, or how we feel that day, but all the way down to our genes. Epigenetics, it's the science and the study of what comes above the genes and affects the genes. So, yeah, I was reading about that just this morning and how just parts of the environment, but let's just talk about food, for example. Molecules in good food, plants basically, will turn on or off a gene. So they
Yeah.
can turn on the healthy genes, turn off the unhealthy genes. Basically, that's what they do. They don't turn on bad genes, generally speaking. So, and even if we're born with some genes from one parent, one side of the family, that say, oh, you're meant to have diabetes or heart disease or, some other ailment, that if we do the right things, we can turn off or postpone that gene. We can stop those genes from actually acting out in our lives. And I think that is so exciting. And that's once what you were saying, back to we can get better from nothing. It goes hand
Well,
in hand.
that nothing is the thought, no? Is the intention and the belief that we have that our bodies are going to repair themselves with the help of the trust. But many times we place the trust in something external because we are also primed by all the society and by all the media that we need something from outside so that we can improve the inside of our bodies. But what really changed is just the thought that we have, no? It's just a vibration. I was also listening to a documentary today about the vibrational nature that we have and how our bodies and the vibration that we emit usually is about 7.8 hertz, or more or less. That's why they approximate the number to 10 hertz. And that's also the vibration of the earth. That's also the vibration of nature. So every time we are around nature, every time we connect with ourselves in meditation, we get to that point of vibration and we repair. And there was a very attractive study for me that was done in the early 1930s in a German university, and they placed the students in the basement of a facility where they were not able to have the sunlight,
Unlike,
where they were completely isolated of nature, and they were put there for several months, and they measured their health and how it was deteriorating, and they also measured the vibration of their bodies, and the vibration was also getting disrupted by isolating themselves from the vibration of the earth. So it is amazing how these kind of vibrations are going to change us, and how all the things that we have now in the digital stage are also leading us to disrupt our vibrations, no?
Mm. Well, I mean, and that for me is obviously research that is just in the beginning phases. There are a lot of things that we can't see with the naked eye that are just beginning to be researched. For example, like you're saying, how we vibrate, and we do because we're molecules actually. We're small, teeny atomic particles that
Yeah.
are together and more space than there is mass, right? It's so interesting, but that might be a little too deep.
Yeah, of course, that's deeper because it's physics and it's all the quantum theory and those things. But it is just how we don't know so much about ourselves, and how we, by trusting and by repairing the contact with the simple things, we can just adjust our bodies to keep the balance and to keep in health, no?
Well, that's so interesting how you say don't know so much about ourselves. So when we first got together to talk about doing this podcast, we had a little conversation, and I think that you reached out to me after my post about age.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I do want to chat a little bit about that, because and it goes right along with placebo effect. I mean, if everyone can keep that in mind as we're talking about it, that when I was beginning my study in physiology, exercise physiology and nutrition, I started learning, this was before epigenetics. So I started learning about how when we exercise regularly throughout life, our bodies can have the internal workings of someone 30 years younger.
Yes.
Now, the skin is different, but now we know a lot more about the skin too, so that's coming. But we started learning about the insides, the muscles, the blood vessels, the heart, and how much younger they look than the actual age of the human, just from exercising regularly and somewhat intensely on a regular basis. So that's when I started, I believed long ago that, and I'll share that story maybe later, but, about our ability to control or have an effect on how we age and what happens to our bodies as we go through life. This started to be proof to me, like, wow,
Yeah.
there are 60-year-olds that have some parts like a 30-year-old, and that's really exciting. And that was actually my motivation, that right there, to get teaching about this, and also make sure I kept doing it myself. And so then there's this other side, though. I was lucky enough to be interested in that and learn about that very early. But then there's another side where I think a lot of people reside about age. And that is, they have an idea about what aging looks like. At 40, it should look like this. At 50, it looks like this. At 60, it looks like this. And then that's what they believe. And that's what happens. Exactly. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think there are many ways. One of them we just talked about, what we think is a lot of times how our body reacts. And we don't know the specifics of that, but we've seen it, right? And then the other part is psychologically, we have done research in what we believe, what we think is what our mind is turned on to finding. So if we have a belief, the mind will be much more open to seeing proof of that belief, rather than seeing the other side of the coin. So if I'll just say, I remember in my 20s, I had a friend that that said, my knees, I'm getting old. And I'm like, you don't say that. You're 20, don't say that. But that person, the reason why I said it is, like, if you say that my knees are hurting, I'm getting old, you will constantly feel pain in your knees, because that's what your brain is attuned towards. And you will constantly watch yourself get older and your knees get worse. But if your brain is attuned towards something else, which you can train yourself to do, no, this is just a temporary pain. Maybe I'll stretch and it might feel better. Oh, I just stretched and it did feel better. I'm perfectly fine, then we have a different way of aging. But at the same time, if we expect ourselves to be and look and feel a certain way as we go on in life, that's what I was saying, that's what'll happen. So I decided to stop thinking or even knowing what my age was about 15 years ago, because I don't want to have an expectation of what I should be like today, or what I should be doing, or how I should be feeling, or like, how, anyway, that's where I was going with that.
No, that's perfectly blended with the talk about the vibrations and the beliefs and the placebo. So it all links together, because it is the vibration of your thoughts. It is the attraction, it is the attention of the things that we are primed. We are primed by society, or by labels, by the chronological age. How are we supposed to be? And everything is already defined for us in certain stages of life. So if we are attentive to those messages, of course, we lose our ability to reverse the things and to really have more attunement or balance with what our bodies are dictating us and our bodies are doing. And those messages that we need, the certain kind of food, or those messages that we need to exercise in certain time of the day or in certain days, those are the subtle messages of the body of telling you, you need to detoxify something. You need to get rid of something, and you need to start eating something different that might not be what the society is telling you, to repair yourself. And when we are children, we are very connected with those messages. And I know this because my daughter, it has different kind of tastes for the food. So at certain times of the season or of the year, she demands to eat, for example, let's say eggs, no? And she has the crave to eating egg. So we give her eggs, even if she wants at the morning or in the afternoon, it doesn't matter, because that's what the body is asking. And it asks for that because it needs the minerals and the vitamins and everything that is inside of the egg. So the body already knows what you need. So if you just pay attention to the messages, and as you are children, you are not distracted with what society tells you. So that's what happens. She doesn't eat also candies because she doesn't like sugar too much, because we are healthy in that way. We have get rid of many of the sugary things, although we sometimes have those pleasures, no? But she's not anxious about them. So she knows that when she wants to eat them, she can, and
Oh,
nothing
that's
will happen. Nothing will happen because she doesn't do it often, and she just do it by what she feels. So if we connect the feeling with what we need, that's when we synchronize those energies, no?
Oh my gosh, that is awesome. I mean, wow, just so exciting to hear how you are doing that with your daughter at such a young age.
Yeah.
And right, she's clean. She doesn't have any preconceived notions, or
Yeah.
she's just paying attention to her body and what it's asking for. And that is such a pure example. I love it. But also, I I work with people on that too, and I talk about that in my book, that to listen to the body. And it's so sad that, adults, a lot of adults have lost their connection with their body. So they actually don't even really know how to start listening. What does that mean? So we have to start from a really fundamental level. And with food, especially, I've been working on it myself, for 20 or more years, listening to how do I feel after that meal. But now it's not only that meal, but it's that one thing that I put in the meal that's a little different than when I normally eat, or that time that I ate, it's a little different timing. And I'm always paying attention to how my brain is acting now. Am I alert? Do I need food? What kind of food do I need? Or sometimes it's even like today, before I got together with you, I normally don't eat a specific time here. So I normally don't eat until 2. That's when I start coming down. So if I'm going to be talking to you, I need food before, so I don't have this little downturn while we're talking, So there's so much to pay attention to, but it starts with listening to what your body's asking for. And that's just such a skill that we all need to develop if we haven't been brought up with parents like you. Yeah.
Yes, and it is an innate skill. It is something that we have, and but as you mentioned, many of our background is not fostering that way of being. It is just, you need to eat more. You need to finish everything that you have in the table. You need to, or they sometimes don't know that information also, and they gave in to those sugary different traits that we have in all the candies and all the drinks that they are promoting for children. And what they are provoking is just anxiety. And it is that disconnection of what their body wants, because now the body tastes something that is artificially made. And of course, it is designed to prime your body, and it is designed to attack your hormones and your signals. So what are you going to learn if you are just going to create a disconnection or a disruption in the vibration? No. I just have the analogy of how when you are listening to a radio station and you are driving in the road, sometimes the signal is not getting clear, and as you enter into another state or into another area, you lose the signal and the connection. That is what the toxic food is doing with your signals, is creating resistance, is creating disconnection from the innate messages of your body. So the more we foster the toxic food, the more we disconnect ourselves. And that's how we grow up as adults that don't even believe that our body is talking to us. No?
Don't believe, don't know that it is, don't hear it,
Yeah.
And look, I'm going to be honest. I mean, I say it in my book. In my family growing up, we were focused on getting enough food. That was it. Wasn't like, what is it? What kind of food is it? It's like, are you full? Did you have enough? And that's where a lot of families are. I mean, especially now, and there are more things that we need to look at besides just having enough. I mean, I found after learning about nutrition that it's not just eating the volume. It's eating the combination of all the nutrients that are balanced so that your body tells your brain, like, I feel good now, I'm satisfied, but I don't have to feel full to feel like I had enough. I actually feel more energy. I feel charged. I feel better. My brain is now more awake. That's really what we should be feeling after we eat. But you're right. I think many of us were taught, we want to feel that tight pants feeling, and then we know we're done. But that's not the case.
It's like we need to feel the belt until it goes all the way so that we can get out of the table. And that's the way we are also being taught. My grandmother also used to give us a lot of food when we were children until we got really, really full. So we were, of course, overweight, and we had problems with not obesity, but we had overweight issues, and we were disconnected from many of those messages, no, because we didn't know and they didn't know. So it's just a cycle,
right? We just didn't know. Yeah,
an epigenetic cycle that is recycling. No, it is a thought that is recycling there.
David, I just want to share this. I love sweets, and this goes back to your daughter too. How cool it is that you've taught her that having a little bit now and then is okay, and you can still be very healthy. You can eat sugar. It's just not. It's just the amount of sugar that people are eating these days that's crazy, and it comes from, I think, the fear of eating sugar, because it's like when we're afraid of eating it, or back when we couldn't have it. Like I actually I wasn't allowed to have sugar. Sugar was not in my house. So at the time, when I was growing up, that was supposed to be a good thing. We don't get to eat. But what happened was I would go to my friend's house and I would
Yeah.
binge on sugar because I couldn't have it. And I think that's not only what happens, with children, if they're restricted from having certain things, they're going to get it somewhere, somehow, right? But then it's also with adults. When we tell ourselves we can't have that ever again, oh my gosh, we're going to want that so badly. So that's what I did with myself also in my younger adult years, my late teen and younger adult years, was I also was on all these strict diets, because I could never be thin enough. But then, I couldn't have a lot of food. And then when I could eat it, I would have, I don't know, dessert for dinner. I would have dessert for dinner because I was an adult. Nobody was watching me or telling me what to do. And I know that this calories was about the same calories as my dinner. So I wasn't healthy, but I was thin, and I wasn't feeling good. I was always tired. I didn't know how to eat. But that was my upbringing, and the kind of weird things that go on in your head when you're not able to have things. And then we also don't recognize how awful we feel when we're not, like if we felt that way for most of our lives, we don't know how great we can feel when we all actually start eating better. The energy, that we have, and the amount that we're able to do, and the alertness, and the even happiness, that we feel when we're eating well and right. But if we haven't felt that before, we have no idea.
Yeah, and that comparison that you mentioned about thin and healthy and not always being the case, because sometimes you are deprived for certain foods. That's what also creates disruptions, mainly in the psychological mind that people have of image. No, they pay a lot of attention of the image that you are displaying and the health, but it doesn't, many times it is not matching. No, that doesn't mean that if you look good you are ill. No, that also is not the purpose of the comment. It's
Right.
just that we need to know how internally we are and how everything is working. And what you mentioned about feeling, how do you feel when you eat certain kind of foods, is something that I also like to promote or to tell my daughter, because she also tells me that sometimes when she eats those kind of too much things of sugar, she feels that she's sleepy or she's tired or she's distracted. And that's what I tell her. Now I tell her that when she abuses the sugar, I mean, it's okay to eat some pieces, but if you abuse it, your neurons get disconnected and they release their hands. No, I tell her that the neurons are always touching their hands and always making this connection so that they can work and think and process everything. And when you eat the average or more than the average of the sugar limit, then your neurons got disconnected. And that's what she now knows. And she knows it so well that she tells the adults in her life, and they are surprised with her, because she's like, you shouldn't eat that much sugar, grandma, because you are going to be disconnected from your neurons. So that's so funny because they pick up the messages and the information in a fun way, in a healthy way also, that it is okay to eat, but not to abuse, no?
So much, not to abuse. I love that. And David, since you know, have studied all these things deeply, could you tell me now what do you really mean, you know, scientifically about disconnecting neurons? What were you meaning to say to your daughter that you can't because it's too, you know, complex?
Complex, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when sugar is going above the level or the threshold, what we are doing is that we are creating unconsciously a process that is an hypoglycemic signal of our bodies. So there are two receptors in our cells. They are together in the membrane, and many times when one channel of sugar opens to let it process, the blood sugar is going down, and it is something that is primed by eating either too much sugar or this artificial sweeteners that we have in many foods. So the receptors are together and they are creating an indirect loop, and they are creating that disconnection of the receptors, and that is going to prime your brain to send the signal of you need more sugar. But that is not true. That is just a disruption in your connections of your membrane, of your gut, of your cells, and the sensation that you are having a hypoglycemic episode, no?
So in my mind, tell me if this is a good generalization. It's almost like the body does an overcorrection. Like you got so much sugar and the body needs to bring it back down. If your body is working correctly, it has to bring that sugar back down to normal. It can't stay high in your blood. Otherwise it's dangerous. So it's an overcorrection, and the brain then thinks, oops, now you're too low. Is that kind of a good way of explaining it, or?
Yes, it is just that the two receptors are, let's say, this is the receptor of the artificial sweeteners, and this is the channel of the glucose, the GLUT4. So they are very close in distance, let's say, no? So when these receptors feels that either you have too much sugar or you have artificial sweeteners, this is going to send a signal internally that is going to travel to the other channel to open in a wider space and demand more sugar, and your blood sugar is going to go down. So that is going to signal your brain so that you need more sugar, no?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like
Reaction and action, reaction. Yeah.
action and reaction, yes. Indirect action, and you don't notice because, of course, this is at cellular level, no?
Right. But we do notice when we get tired, like you said, after abusing sugar. And that just made me want to say a couple things. First of all, speaking of growing up and, you know, being restricted from sugar, I remember so well my grandparents. I learned my cousins and I would get together at my grandparents' house for holidays, and they had everything, you know, banquet, beautiful buffet. My grandparents would spend so much time on making food and things. But of course, my favorite was the dessert, of course. I didn't remember any of the other stuff. And we would make ice cream sodas.
Oh.
They would have it, you know, in the fridge, and my cousins and I would get together and we'd make an ice cream soda. And we would, you know, when I was younger, we would maybe have one. But then I remember like maybe around 11 or 12, you know, I would just go and make myself like 3, 4, 5 ice cream sodas because nobody was stopping me. Nobody saw me do it. I could just drink as much as I wanted. And I didn't know why I felt so terrible afterwards. You know, it was so good, but I felt so terrible. And then later, much later, you know, I was eating much better, much differently. I wasn't having sugar much at all, you know, much sugar. I wasn't overdoing the sugar. I have to say I eat sugar on a regular basis, but it's very small amounts. And I went to, the first time I saw a Wegmans, it was in Virginia. I was like huge grocery store, the biggest I've ever seen, and it was near the airport. And I went there for the first time ever, and they had like this giant candy aisle, just like all this candy for what seemed like a half a mile, and all of my old favorites from when I was little. I used to love this stuff, so I had to like I got little bags, you a whole thing where you open up and it comes down the silo, So I just got a little bit, but of all of my old favorites, so I ended up with like maybe a handful of candy, right? And I went into the car. I was like, oh, I've got to try this. Oh my gosh, I've got to try. So I tried every single one, and then it was all gone. And then I was like, oh, that does not feel good. It's like a ball of wax in my stomach, and I feel really tired. How could I have eaten all this? When I was younger, I had no idea how bad it felt. It's not that now I'm an adult and I can't handle it. It's that we didn't know. Now I'm so much healthier, and I know now what feels bad and what feels good. And I have this much better level of feeling good on a regular basis. So yeah, I just thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, that's the feeling that many people have when we abuse sugar. I also have a crave for chocolates, not for the candies, but for the chocolate. And also when I abuse those kind of foods, I automatically feel it in the energy, as you mentioned. Your energy really goes down, and your brain is more distracted, and you even feel sleepy because of that episode of hypoglycemia that you are provoking, no? So it is normal that when people, let's say in the office, as you should have wrote in your book about how many people in the industry or in any corporate job, they just eat what they gave them in the cafeteria or in the area that they have near. And once they return from the lunch, they are very sleepy and they are very slow to think, or they have problems to take decisions because they overeat or they eat too much sugary things, even in the drinks, no? Even in the liquids that they consume. So when they abuse that and they feel like that, that's the reflection of the hypoglycemic shock that we are having, no?
And then that's a great thing to bring up, David, because our brains really do run on sugar. It runs on blood glucose. So we run on glucose. It's the kind of sugar that the body needs that we create from our food. And so I feel like people in the office, they feel like they're getting tired, or even at home, they feel like they're getting tired, and maybe they don't realize they're getting tired, but what they realize is they're craving sugar. Yeah. Because that's what the body will do. I need simple sugar. I need energy, which is so we just go for the sugar because we feel the craving. Whereas if we stop for a moment and think, when was the last time that I had a real meal? Oh, 5, 6, 7 hours ago. I think it's time for a meal. Eat the food first, then see what happens. Maybe from what I've experienced, you might not even crave the sugar anymore because now your body has the energy that it needs. And that's really what it's asking for. It's not asking for, that candy, or that sweets. But also, for sure, if we still have that craving and we have a little piece of chocolate or something like that after, it's such a small part of everything else we've eaten. We've got all that great nutrients already in our digestive system. Our microbiome is happy in eating it. And then it doesn't affect us as much because it doesn't go straight to the brain and that system that we're talking about. So it's all mixed in with all the other good stuff. It's not as much, we don't even want as much to eat it. It doesn't take as much because we've already started bolstering our blood sugar with the meal that we've eaten. So there are better times to have sugar than others. And I always talk about that, put it off if you can afford, if you could have your meal and you find out you can not have that craving, then don't. But if you have to have that, then there are better times to eat it.
Yes, exactly. And it is not depriving, as you mentioned, because just the notion that you are banning or prohibiting something is going to make your brain crave it more. So it is just the opposite that you have to do. And as you mentioned, if you start with the meal and then maybe at the end you want something sweet, you can eat just a piece of chocolate or a piece of the sugar that you want, and that's not going to be the same amount as if you have started with the sugar. So it is also the mixing of the ingredients or the mixing of the food of the different macronutrients is going to make a different kind of peak in the insulin levels. So it is going to have a different reaction in your body, because your body is going to feel that the food that you have requires a lower amount of insulin to process the sugar that it has, not the peak levels of insulin that you would need if you start with a sundae or with a cake or with something like that, no?
Start with it. Yeah, exactly. Or only have it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's quite interesting, before I knew about nutrition back then, again, young teen years, etc., where I would eat, I remember eating a Cinnabon from the mall. I was so hungry and I smelled that. I don't know if you remember the Cinnabons,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
smells all over the mall, and it just makes you want to have one. And then it's this big, but I wasn't full. And then I found out it was 1,000 calories. And I'm like, how can I still want lunch after I had 1,000 calories? Didn't make sense to me at the time. But it is everything that we're talking about. It's like that kind of sugar, those kind of calories don't fill us up.
No.
They do increase the insulin. It's a high spike and it absorbs really fast. And then we're left with nothing again. So we need more. And then if we don't know that what we really need is a meal, then what? Maybe we'll eat another Cinnabon and then another one until we feel full. And then we're like 4,000 calories in.
And then
And
we don't have a space for the real food, no?
right.
So that's a problem. And also what you mentioned about the calories is very, very important right now, that we already, I think that we are losing the perception of calories matter more than what you are really eating, no? Calories is just a measure that certain kind of foods can have, but many of them are empty calories and they are just going to prime your body for more, and they are going to create a disruption in many of the hormones. And the other calories that come from real food are going to really regulate your hormones and regulate everything that you are demanding, no? So
Yeah, I love that. I mean, yes, because if we only calories are important. I do talk about that in the book because they are a measurement, and it is important to know, uh, in that sense of what we were just talking about. This whole Cinnabon is 1,000 calories, and I'm not even going to be full. Versus, I provide an example of a meal, in a book with chicken and salad and potato and like even butter on your potato, and it's still, I don't remember the number, but less than a Cinnabon.
yeah, of
and
course, yes.
and you will be so much more full, and your energy will last so much longer, and you won't have that insulin peak that we were just saying, and the glucose peak, and it's just so different. So there is that thing. It is a measurement, but it's not okay to just go by calories either, because like I was saying, you could be thin, and we
Empty.
were saying, and not healthy.
Yes,
Yeah.
and also a good example of those calories is the artificial sweeteners, no? They
Mm.
have 0 calories, or that's what they say, or many foods now, they have a label that is 0 sugar, but those zero sugar are having artificial sweeteners. They are having aspartame, they are having sucralose, they are having all of these synthetic sugars that are going to do the reaction of the receptors. They are going to create that loop of hypoglycemia and anxiety. So in the end, you are trying to reduce the calories by consuming the artificial sweetener instead of the real sugar, and you are fooling your body or your cells into demanding more in the next 3 or 4 hours, no?
Yeah, so interesting, right? How we can. So it's all a lot about what we're choosing and the mixture of foods and also the timing of our foods to help our bodies to stay in high vibration and high energy mode, optimal thinking and movement and all those things. And that comes right back around to how we feed ourselves to affect our health, but also it affects our genetics. And David, I know in your book, you talk about how we transfer our health to our children in ways that you talked about, like how we raise the children, of course. But even now, we're finding that a mother who is pregnant, how she eats can change her genes and the genes of her child. And whether or not she's stressed can change her genes and the genes of her child. If she sleeps enough, same thing. I mean, there's all the epigenetics that we're finding now that we pass on to our children, even if it wasn't in our blood history line.
Yes, that is extremely important. And as you mentioned, it is in one of the chapters of the book that I talk about that connection. It is in chapter 2, and chapter 3 is again in those topics, that the example of the pregnant woman is having a turmoil in terms of the emotional chaos that she has with her partner, and how all the stress that she has is priming her to eat poorly, to gain weight, to sleep worse or less. And all of those messages are being received by the child. And as you mentioned, they are transferred into 7 generations. So not just this one is going to go along for other 6 generations if the other generations are not taking more consciousness and changing, because the good news is that it is reversible, no? So if the next generation is doing something to improve their lives and their lifestyle, the payoff, it's going to be in the next generation and of course in yourself, no?
Yeah, I think that's the important thing for everyone to remember, is that everything is reversible or changeable. If we give it a little bit of time, do the right thing for a certain amount of time, there's so many things we can fix or make better.
And I think that we can round up or wrap up the conversation around this, of how can we genetically modify everything that we have inside just by paying attention to what we are doing, just by paying attention to the emotions that we are having, the cravings that we are having, the stimuli that we are receiving or looking for, and sensing, feeling our bodies, no? As you mentioned, feeling how are we feeling when we eat something that is not making us feel well or productive, or is not making us feel alert. And also when we watch or when we listen to something, that is also changing your biology and your genes, because you are being primed by everything that you are receiving and imbuing in your senses, and that is going to disrupt at many levels the signals of your body, no?
Yeah, that's a good wrap up there, David. I like that.
Thank you, thank you. Anything else that you want to talk about?
I think this is a great place to stop. If we want to do it again, we can certainly have
Yeah, of
another
course.
conversation.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's perfect so that we can have a second part and go in the productiveness of the work area and how also it impacts in the companies, no, in the performance of a company, in the performance of the employees, and all of those topics
I
are
think
left.
that's, yeah, I think that's a really great idea. Surely.
Yeah.
Love that.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for listening. And if we want a message for us to stay, is you can always reverse your bad thoughts, bad decisions, or bad choices, and making them help you improve and enhance your performance always. No.